Hello. Welcome to tonight's bedtime story by Lucid Tales. I hope your day has been bright and full of joy. But whether it has been dead calm or stormy seas for you, it's time to relax now. Find somewhere comfortable, whether it's a sleeping bag or a feather bed, and make sure you're ready for sleep. Stretch your arms above your head if you can, and feel the freedom in your shoulders, the little loosening that means it's time for bed. Tonight's story is a tale of giants, and how sometimes they, like we, can be kind. Here follows the tale of the giant of Grabbist Hill. Once upon a time, many moons and summers and winters before the great conquerors of France had ever set foot on the shores of the isles to their northwest, Exmoor was a part of a fierce Celtic kingdom called Demonia. Mighty people who understood the earth within themselves and the ways to look to see magic. Now the great chieftains' hill forts are no more than grassy mounds ringed with earthworks, like ripples that long have ceased to tremble. The round houses are mere clusters of roughly weathered stones, and heather and gorse grow wild, and the wind whistles cold where once families ate and sang and gathered around the hearth to tell tales. And the Celts themselves lie deep in turf-covered barrows, their bones clasped in bronze armlets and collars in the cold embrace of the damp earth. But there still remains one who walked the wooded slopes of Demonia, a relic of that ancient past who towers high above the treetops and tors of the moor, and even now is sometimes glimpsed by the fishermen who brave the waters of the Bristol Channel. The giant, for giant he be, has no name that we may know, but it is known that he makes his home upon the peaceful, pretty Grabbist Hill, high above the purple heather, above the oak, beech, and holly. Sometimes still a child will see him and wave to him, and when he waves back his hand is so mighty that it sends a breeze to dry the washing hung out neatly on the lines of the villages. When the giant needs food, it is known that he walks with his great strides carefully down through the moors and hills to the harbour of Minehead, and will wade far out into the channel, searching for shoals of pilchard and herring. When he finds them, he scoops the fish up in his hands and eats them there. Once he has had his fill, the giant will sometimes pour the fish left over in his cupped hands into the nearest fishing boat, and so aid their catch too. Sometimes the friendly Grabbist giant will go further to help the small creatures with whom he shares the land, as one man in particular can attest. Some years ago, a man called Elijah Crocombe left his harbour early one morning with only 2 crewmen, rowing steadily out to sea in his leaky boat under a blue sky and rearing, teeming clouds. No other fishing boat was on the water. There was a storm on the wind, they could taste it, and so Elijah and his men rowed forth alone, under a sky that slowly blackened and bruised with rain. At last a steely grey mass gathered on the horizon, a squall that approached faster than Elijah's men could row back to shore, though they pulled with all their strength. The wind hit like a hammer, blinding them with rain and spray and whipping an oar away into the wild waves. The leaking boat slowly filled with water, and the waves surged and boiled in a 10-foot swell. Then, when all seemed lost, out from the seething, writhing mist came an enormous hand, calloused and scarred with work. It closed gently around the boat like a great cage and lifted it 100 feet above the savage sea as though it had been a feather. A second great hand came and hovered above, sheltering the men from the pounding rain, and thus safely cocooned, they were carried through that howling storm and back to home. At last, the gentle, rocking motion of the giant's footsteps stopped, and the boat was lowered carefully into the surf. The giant sat down on the headland and watched the men drag their dinghy high onto the sand, soaked through and cold and alive. At last, the giant, satisfied that the men were safe and not a net or basket had been lost, stood and made his way back up to Exmoor and Grabbist Hill. Perhaps if you are lucky enough, you too one day will catch sight of the Grabbist giant, and wave to him and have your washing dried by the wave of his hand in return. But even if you are not so lucky, you can still go to visit the bridge he once built across the River Barle, 180 feet long, and perhaps you will walk in the footsteps of the Celts he built it for. Good night. Sleep well, and I will see you soon for another bedtime story.